American voters. Did you have one of those? Yeah, unbelievable. Don't get one of the cage. Just trying to get rid of them. Like I did.
Okay, thank you. A third of his life in Chicago, a third in Peru, and a third in Italy. So he's very well known by all of his tags, and well respected.
Native of America?
Yeah, born in Chicago. That's what I understood. It was a shock and a surprise. You know, I just looked at it, that on the way home here, I stopped.
I did an eyeball on the way down.
Hey, how's it going?
You did. Oh, yeah, okay, I got it.
All right, both of them? Or did you give your 2013 already?
Well, the guy was still here with me. So I'm serious, right?
Okay. Thank you.
Well, I can't do it. I got that one on the wall. I'm trying to find an address to the public. Maybe it's hard
Yeah, June 1st. It's gonna be on there by contract.
I don't know about, oh, you talking about different part?
Yes.
Oh, no.
Oh, you're talking about the
You
light.
just get the link.
Park, yeah.
So it'll be years. And it'll let it like say.
You helping me, helping
It's about that time, or close to that time. Thank you for making it back. We're gonna discuss zoning regulations, and what are some things that we might need to know as we lay out different designs. That's what I'm assuming. So I think Tom and David, you're gonna like lead this one.
We have to do our technology thing.
What do you think?
Is that good?
And leads a very kind word. Yeah, leads a very kind
To
word.
lead the discussion.
Yeah, we might just introduce the topic, but I believe, like our original model, we're the sponges here, guys. So, really, Preston, you have some of the zoning board here also, right? Some planning commission?
Yeah,
Chair.
Chair.
Hey, great, okay. So, so what we thought we'd do today is think about the different zoning, especially as we talk about downtown. And whether we have the right zoning in place that can deal with some of the issues that we're talking about, or whether we need to perhaps in the work that we're doing recommend alternatives for some of that. So I believe everybody knows us by now, no need for introductions. So, but maybe folks that are here that maybe on the zoning board want to take just a minute to introduce yourselves, that'd be great. Yes.
Tim Holland, like I said, chair of the planning board.
Okay.
Been involved in the town ever since it was first developed.
Since you were born.
Yes, since I was born, basically.
Started that at age of 2, right?
And my proudest achievement is sitting here in front of me.
All right. Now I got this figured out. Well, that is a great achievement. Yeah, Michael's fantastic. So, okay, so chairman of the planning commission. Okay. So, I believe right now, and Preston, you might have to help us through all this. You all currently have what types of zoning do you have that are currently on the books for we consider the downtown use?
We have 2 commercial zoning districts, CS1 and CS2, and they're very similar. CS1 is a little more, has a little more uses than CS2, but the CS2 has more of a heavier and commercial use to it.
Okay. If, well, would either of these categories, would either of these take multi-use buildings, like live-work buildings with commercial, residential, or even commercial office, residential stacked?
There is a mixed use allowance, but it's a, we were looking at this recently.
Okay.
It's basically the residential can't be more than 50% of the commercial.
Okay.
So you basically have a live work 1/1 type allowance.
Okay. Okay. And also in your zoning, do you have requirements for parking and stuff that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, yeah. There is a minimum parking requirement, but we took most of the sort of exact numbers out.
Oh, neat.
We just have a reference to the ITE standard. That's sort of the starting point.
Oh, interesting. Great. Smart. Right? Because, yeah, so many times we run into the ordinance and parking is what kills it.
Yes.
It just doesn't make sense.
Resort family, you know.
Right, so it wouldn't match anything else.
But you did have an issue before where we based on square footage of the building, so it would have not required enough parking, which is why we got ordinance passed to reference that.
Okay, which has a bad use, like if it's a restaurant, it's this many, if it's a hotel, it's that many. Okay, well, actually, it sounds pretty good. I was thinking that either any of that would kill this, but it doesn't. So, but a lot of places will write an ordinance like a downtown ordinance, which you know encourages mixed use and you know kind of says parking by whatever uses you have. And some towns, one of the coolest things I've seen recently in some small downtowns is they said regarding parking, you don't have to have it on your site, but you have to have enough parking spaces within 500 feet of your business. And so it makes some very difficult parcels all of a sudden can be developed because, you know, the next door is a giant parking lot with never anybody in it or something like that, which is kind of a cool idea. And do your ordinances also require stuff like buffer screening and things like that, or?
They do.
Okay. And dealing with, I'm sure there's a signage ordinance. Yeah. And then, how about with uses that might not be compatible? You guys have any kind of a chart that deals with that?
No.
Okay. Okay. So, you know, some of the uses that Aaron was talking about this morning, and I think you looked at the different, dozen different commercial uses, and then residential, you know, big conversation about mixed missing middle kind of housing, would they, and if we were just gonna brew up a concept, would it fit okay within the CS1 category?
The sort of missing middle stuff?
Yeah,
No, for whatever reason, single family is allowed in commercial, but multifamily is not.
okay,
So multifamily is only allowed in our multifamily zone districts.
okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I know multifamily's been most towns have a hard time trying to figure out how to deal with multifamily, so, okay, so we probably have to change that anyway, if we
Yeah,
wanted to use
yeah.
the existing code. Sometimes with Tom's, project, you end up working up an entirely different code, which for some towns, it would make sense, but for other towns, it wouldn't, which is a form-based code, right, which is, so it really doesn't matter what's in the buildings, it just has to look like this.
Yeah.
Tom, what you're finding out about Beech Mountain, I don't know if that's reasonable here or not.
Is your zoning ordinance online?
It is.
Okay, can you tell me
You have to go to townofbeechmountain.com and then probably link to it.
And while you're doing that, I'm gonna invite Whitney and Aaron to get into this, because I know you guys are both AICP and have probably dealt a lot more with trying to, turn cats into dogs than I have, usually you guys, Aaron, by the way, in a former career, dealt with zoning in, Salisbury?
Yeah, I was a planner in Salisbury.
And Whitney with
Town of Huntersville, so when someone mentioned Burkdale, like,
there you go.
I'm very excited.
So Whitney, maybe to start with you, did y'all have to you put a form-based code into effect in Huntersville, right?
I was not around then,
Okay.
I think I was still in high school, but so what the northern towns of Mecklenburg did was to kind of, I think and Tom was probably a part of this, was they wanted to be different because a commuter rail was coming for them. And they were really excited about it. They wanted something different, and so they did a process like this. And all of their three ordinances were kind of modeled the same way, so that when someone was developing in any one of those jurisdictions, because it was hard to tell what was Cornelius, what was Huntersville, and yes, there are maps, but they wanted it to kind of have a different feel than when you were in Charlotte. And so that was the way that they went about it. And each one of them has approached the form-based code a little bit differently. But yeah, that was, like you said, it was one way to look at how the building is formed versus how the particular use. It did reduce some buffers. I think Huntersville in '03 went through and rezoned the whole town. So you could have what they did was they said there was a general residential, and if you were rezoning something, it had to be to something different. But they kind of limited to, I think, 9 zones that were allowed in the town. And I feel like you have a somewhat similar zoning number, there's not a lot of zoning districts.
There's not.
So you haven't gone into this Euclidean, we'll build up on what everyone's
No,
on top of each other.
I mean, there's only 5 or 6
as far as?
zoning districts.
Where are they on the menu?
Go back to your left there, establishment of zoning districts and map, down.
Go down.
Down.
There.
Oh, yeah, let's take a look at
That went to Florida.
Did I go to the wrong place?
That went to something else.
No, go back up on the menu, because it's super.
Yeah, there. That should be it there. I don't know why. Oh, there it is, okay. So, R1, R2, R2A are pretty much the same, then you got R3A, 3B, are the multifamily. So those are your 3 residential districts. CS1 and CS2 are basically the same, and then you got a public-private service, which is basically anything government, anything sort of, the club is zoned PS. And then you have a resort. The resort is actually excluded from any sort of zoning requirements.
They operate under covenants?
They basically don't have to operate under anything. That was when the town was formed. They were basically excluded.
We want that district.
Everybody says, how do we get in that district? I'm like, yeah, that's.
But you do have
Preston,
conditional
let
districts.
me follow up on that part. You know, people keep saying that they're not allowed to be zoned, but there is a zoning, that's why we put this in there,
Sure.
zoning district.
Right.
But it doesn't prohibit anything.
They have covenants,
Well,
I'm sure, right?
well,
I mean, they
No,
have-
it's just a result, it's just a ski area, basically, and they're.
Oh,
really
just
And the
just-
town
Just
charter,
like- oh,
in the
so-
town charter, it said we cannot do any zoning that would prohibit its use as a resort,
Yeah.
i.e. lighting, noise, it listed everything.
Yeah, it's-
But we still created that BMRI district, but it basically
Yeah.
allows everything in it.
Sure, but nobody's building condos in that district or anything like that, are they?
No.
Not yet.
Not yet, yeah.
So, could
Yeah,
happen.
right.
But do they
Yeah,
have
they
certain,
have some
they have
land
a,
that's available.
so they probably have some type of legal framework that regulates what they can and can't do internally as part of their corporation, I would think, or there's corporations say, whatever we wanna do for the life of our project, we can do.
As long as it is in conjunction with the resort usage,
Okay,
they can do it.
so they can build their own town center if they want, right?
They could.
Okay, with hotels and.
Yeah, because when we went through the actual
Yeah.
creating this district, we went item by item with everything we had. And like, would this be a resort possibility? And everything, the answer is yes.
Okay.
But we did want to get them in that zoning so we can do, building codes and stuff like that.
Okay.
So,
First Amendment to 2007.
so Tom, if you wanna see that language on your left there on that menu, it's not in this section. If you scroll all the way to the top of that menu, and then,
Charter.
under charter, click the little down arrow. And then it's Article 4. There you go.
We don't have
4.2.
ETJ powers either. That's that first.
Oh, okay, that's good to know.
Because that is kind of up there in that town center areas, that is
And it's part of the charter, so we can't.
What is this telling us? I don't know. This is just saying,
It's basically saying that anything that is zoned BMR, which is the resort, at the date that's ratified, can operate these things. And they don't have, it's allowed, don't have to,
okay, ski resort, theme park, or recreational area? Yes. Okay. Off-street parking?
So guys,
Doesn't say anything about mixed use or housing or anything
would you
like that.
share your computer screen, because I'm just seeing you looking at the.
Oh, share, I'm sorry, yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Share your screen so it can go up for these people online, please.
Okay, hang on, yeah, just.
That bottom line gets me on that charter there. Bottom one, it says that sufficient off-street parking must be provided.
for any new
For
activity.
any new activity, well, or new slopes, they've added a slope, right? One, which, I guess you just opened it this year.
Which slope?
As it goes.
No, it's not been, it's always.
Didn't they switch?
Hey, gentlemen,
I just.
you can help us lead.
Yeah, but I don't know where they're gonna get it.
That's the problem. That's the problem.
Alright, we're good, gentlemen.
Maybe if they would change it from
That's it.
residential.
No, you put back all right?
The next part of that paragraph.
Okay, so can we go back to the zone?
Yeah.
But everything in zoning is first by
Covering
itself.
recreational facilities. The way that reads to me, that, but it's up to them to interpret it.
Give me a
So,
phone.
like,
Well, I've been through too.
yeah, like,
But
it would
depends
be
on how
up
you
to their
read the whole
interpretation.
narrative. That's why we got that zone.
Okay, everyone, please.
But I think that like, unless one of those, so if they did do a, like, either housing.
Doesn't say anything about mixed use or housing or.
Well, so I think that you have some broad language in for activities related to such use, so that's where you get the, you know, like you were adding housing, shopping, yeah. Or a hotel, like it's servicing those things.
Yeah, so people could interpret that way. Pretty broad.
The key there is they're exempt from all zoning, period. And then there's ordinances that deal with hours of operation, lighting, noise, they're exempt from those as well. But the first word, then a semicolon is zoning. So they are exempt from all zoning.
Okay.
Is there a table with setback requirements and where's that?
Yeah, dimensional
I
requirements.
think it's 154, 105, scroll down there.
Just a little bit further down.
Yeah.
There it is. Dimensional requirements.
Okay.
So there's minimum lot areas there, and then setbacks are in the next.
So low density, 40,000, basically 1 acre zoning.
Yeah, and about
This is third of an acre, and then R2A is 4,000, that'd be a 40 by 100 foot lot.
Little,
So that's more like a cottage size house.
Yep.
Do y'all have any zoning with that in it?
One area that is the ski loft, basically, those really tiny, the ones that go up the side of the mountain we were looking at the other day. Those are the only ones that are in R2A.
At the peak, the pinnacle, those houses, no?
Yeah,
No,
the switchbacks that.
Upside down town
Tree
hall.
houses,
By
right?
that slopes, we're looking at the slopes and just that hill that goes up the side of the mountain.
Oh, okay, okay. And it was done for that project, maybe?
I suspect it was, yeah.
Well, looks, we
And then you get into multifamily, yeah.
but you've got, it looks like it says you have a PUD development here. You have a PUD?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
that might be the best way to get this done.
The
So-
PUD is a little unique, though, I wouldn't,
Okay.
How do you have them and what has been your experience with CUDs?
we've only done one that, since I've been here, it was a slope side condo that was part of a PUD. They basically came in for that condo for 32 units. So because it was on a larger parcel, they had to do the PUD, and so that's how they went through it.
But a lot of times, you know, new towns like CUDs, the PUD ordinance is a really great way to do it.
Gives you a lot of flexibility.
Flexibility, what's interesting, it gives you flexibility with the first plan, but then when you try to change it, it's like, it's hard to change. But that's actually to your advantage, because I feel like in this case, we'll give you a plan, make sure you all think it's well organized, and say, yeah, that can go through the PUD. And then you'll be inviting other people to try to implement parts of it, and they can go back and change it, but they have to go back through the planning commission, and I guess council also. And so-
Actually, it's board of adjustment is the only one that reviews PUDs.
Okay. But still have to go back through.
Yeah, they have to
all
go
make
back
sense,
through.
say, well, we're not gonna let you change it unless it's something better. So, it's pretty good, it might be a little vehicle. So, have you used it before, Whitney?
I've used it before in a sense of, require, like, sort of like a conditional district, but more, but it would, when it's tied to infrastructure planning, that's how I've used the PUD. More so, I think it's more common in North Carolina to use conditional districts, that limit something, but you can create, like, towns that I've worked for have created either a TOD district or a transit-oriented development, or a traditional neighborhood district.
Just make a whole new.
It just made a whole new district. I know, like, I worked with the city of Reevesville to create a T&D specifically, because that's how they are going to, that's how they are using some redevelopment, initiative because they have completely different issues going on, but, and they thought the T&D would help them with infill development.
Okay. Aaron, have you ever dealt with either PUD or TND for these?
I haven't really, I mean, I just know they're using, I know, you know, different states do it differently. And there's different requirements in different states. South Carolina uses it a lot, and they use it, the communities, it's really kind of loosey-goosey, open-ended. It's a great flexible tool to really get anything that you want to do, and do it in a way that, you know, is able to, sort of, you know, not necessarily rely on those standards that you would in your other districts. But I mean, when I was in local government planning up here, we never used it.
Oh, in North
But
Carolina?
that was forever ago. That was 30 years ago, so.
But South Carolina doesn't have, like, you can't use conditional districts the way you can in North
Right,
Carolina.
exactly.
And it would depend on how you guys use conditional districts, because sometimes conditional districts are used to, vary rules, and others are used to, it just depends on the jurisdiction, others are used to add, like, if you wanted to
Right.
add something that in another place it would be a PUD that you're, you know, kind of adding and, going above and beyond what the requirement is.
Like in Virginia, we call it conditional zoning. It's
Yes.
like you can do this, we'll let you do it this time, but if it changes back, the conditions
Yes.
won't go with it, right?
No, the conditions stay with, like, the
Okay,
conditions
so
stay
it's
with
maybe the
it,
property,
but you
okay.
still, like, you have to change the condition, like, it becomes its own little, it becomes its own zoning district.
Okay.
In
Okay,
that sense.
so knowing what you know about the sketches that are like, looks like a kid grabbed a crayon and scribbled all over, how do we get this done? And
I think that's something that we put in the plan as far as a recommendation
Yeah.
of, like, cause I mean, we haven't done a deep dive and probably have some
Yeah.
additional conversations once we have a bigger plan involved.
Yeah.
Cause I think that what'll come out of this is either a strategy to have some, like, text amendments in place to say, like, this is what we wanna do for the town center area and define that district. Maybe it is its own, district of where that applies. And it might be, one strategy is to say that this is, maybe becomes part of the future land use plan or the map that says, if you're gonna rezone something, you need to rezone it to this. Or if you wanna, you know, be proactive and say, we want you to go to this, you have the ability to do zoning, you have the ability to initiate zoning changes as a town.
I
Yeah.
mean, that kind of sounds like, it makes the most sense, really.
Yeah.
I mean, is essentially however it can be done, codify the vision, so to speak, that's created. I mean, obviously, there's certain things that you probably wouldn't be able to address in it, you know, in a district, but that might be the easiest, cleanest way to do it, right?
to make a new district. Like
Make a
with the
town
land
center
use
district
plan.
is a way to say, it. Like, this is a town center district.
Town center district, okay.
Like, if we're just
Yeah.
thinking about that quarter mile, like when we started, like that kind of quarter mile circle.
Okay,
Let's just pretend that that is,
yeah, so it's about that.
all intents and purposes, that's it. You can make a town center district that would allow for all the things that we're trying to achieve. Whether it be uses, size and scale of building, it might be a way to kind of do a quasi form base, so that you're not
Right.
having to redo your entire code.
Right,
You could see that also as like an
Well-
overlay, but I think it would be easier just to make it its own district.
right. So and, you know, we're just, all us mice are just chatting here,
Yeah.
okay? So, you know, Tom's work is brilliant in that sometimes has form-based code. In Virginia, and it's not North Carolina, so you gotta correct me on this, you gotta have an architect on your staff to help
Yeah.
interpret that, and it's a,
Absolutely not.
yeah, it's like, no, I don't know if Beach Mountain's right. Another way to do it would be to make a district,
And you
proffer
would put,
the plan, and then have a set of design guidelines
yes,
that either the BZA or the.
and they
or
wouldn't
the
necessarily
staff
be,
could interpret.
I wouldn't call them design guidelines, it would be actual ordinance language, because design guidelines would be, you would be able to interpret those, and you want something more, a little
A little tighter,
tighter.
okay,
You don't have to have an architect to do that. The other thing is that you could, as the, you know, it can be something very small too, like you can start out very small, and as the town center grows, because you could say something like, yeah, we'll entertain rezonings to town center, and then you're able to increase it that way. Now, that is not going to probably solve your solution if you wanted to create different I know that we've talked about maybe different commercial pockets or looking at different parts of the, like that may have a different challenge or need something different.
Well, I forgot, you already do have an architect on staff. Are you on the staff?
Well,
Wait a minute, let's go. Part-time, but if you retire, you know, that might be a part.
But we had, in North Carolina, the model 20 years ago is that we always suggested having what we call a town architect on staff. Take someone to understand architecture. When people submit plans, they can review them. The development industry in North Carolina don't like to be told what to do, and so they lobbied at the state level and basically outlawed the ability for towns to regulate design. And the only way that you can do that is through covenants, say through a like an association, like a community association. So it's regulated by the development itself. Yeah.
I would say that is very true for single family.
Yeah.
I don't know that that is completely true for commercial.
That's true. There's certain things that you,
Yeah.
like
Like
for attached
multifamily and
housing,
commercial,
you
they
can
have-
still, you can still have some of
You can
that.
still have, you can still
But
have.
because it got complicated, we said, well, no, it's just that you have to, I think you have to have some, if you're doing a development, you have to have some private covenants as well that help regulate it. And so basically what we've done is we've transferred over all the architectural design guidelines to the private development itself and just left the, kind of the general things like setbacks and, lot sizes and those kind of basic standards that don't have to do with design, it's just more about zoning and size, to the, within the ordinances. And that's been kind of what we've done with it. You don't know that because you haven't.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, we've been doing that for a long time.
Didn't know you got
Yeah.
outlawed, that's.
Yeah. Well, and there are several states, like, the Urban Land Institute's going around the country talking about, you need to do this at your state level, so that we can do whatever we want. And that's okay, I mean, it's like, that's the way the world works. So we just, there's another way of doing it. What I was gonna show is, we prepared a form-based, more of a form-based, and I need to do a presentation, I need to have it prepared for this. Then we get into this level of detail and discussion, but just to show you when people say, what's a form-based code mean? Why would we want something, if we're gonna do a special district, will we add kind of form-making elements to that we don't have on our books now? So it's almost like a planned unit development. And, see if there's a table of contents. I don't know if there is or not. But, like this is an overview. And so basically what you allow are I was showing you missing middle, earlier today. Basically missing middle, these are different types of basically all sorts of house sizes. Like right now your residential zoning probably allows, this right here. And I think you actually can do a multifamily apartment on like 100 by 150 foot lot, which is kind of big, it's bigger than this, but so forth. And then all this stuff probably in here, except for cottage, you have cottage, which is a 40 by 100, which is here. And then, but this other stuff, it kind of says, well, we've got a PUD you can come in and do stuff with, right? Is a PUD. And, but it gets complicated and tricky with things like pocket courts and so forth. And then there's mixed use shop fronts. And then generally what you do is you submit a zoning, a more detailed zoning map that, let me just exit out of this for a second. Where's that? Scroll down. Bear with me for a second. Okay. This is like a regulating map. It's not an illustration, with building footprints and trees and all that kind of stuff. Basically, this is showing you the different transect zones. Remember I was talking earlier about T1 through T5? So here are the transect zones, and in this case, we actually did anyway, there's kind of a center general and edge zoning that we've listed as T1 to T5 through T3, and then there's rural and natural areas as well. And there's certain things like civic uses and parking. And this was on This is how big is all the public works property, like, what is it, like 17 acres or something? Bob, do you remember how much?
No, it's closer to 7.
7, okay, this is a 10
6 and a
acre.
half.
This is a, might be a good example, because this is a 10 acre infill property.
Like a 5-minute circle on there?
Is there,
Yes.
yeah, there is actually, that might actually be a 2.5-minute circle.
Okay.
No, it's a 5-minute walk radius, here it is.
Yeah, so that relates really to.
That does
the
relate,
size
yeah.
of the,
Yeah, and so what you do, you identify certain areas, and then you, with these 3 different zones, dark purple, medium purple, light purple, and then all these building types that I showed you on the previous page, most of them are, in this case, a lot of them are allowed in different districts, but we regulate out certain things like, mixed use, and in this case, they were doing an art and education building, which had its own kind of zoning, that's these red things. Basically, that could only be allowed in the more dense, and then most of the housing and, types could be allowed in the medium, and then on the edge, we wanted to, because there were surrounding neighbors, we excluded anything that was attached, except for two duplex, basically. And so it's very simple, and then, so this is what happens when someone comes in and says, and then we can plat it out, and we ended up platting it out. I can probably find an example of the platting, but that wasn't part of the zoning. That was something separate. It was more the development. Here we go. Okay. So then the developer builder, when they submitted their subdivision plat, they submitted this zoning with all the platting out. And they basically labeled, the T-zones that way. And then, and so say example, you all did this as a town, we platted it out this way, you're in charge, this is your property. And then you had the opportunity to say, okay, now that we've got it all set up this way, we can sell it to a master developer and they can take it from here. Or you could say, we're gonna actually sell off lots just like a master developer do, one at a time. You could sell lots. And so when people come in and say, I'd like to build, this kind of housing, you say, well, here are the areas you can do that, and then they say, what are the rules? Then what you do is you go to, okay, for each of these building types, we have one page with everything you need to know, everything, that's why it's called form-based, if I can find the example. Here. Pick out a good one.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Townhouses, for example. This was with an earlier graph, you can see the construction lines, but basically this is an 11 by 17 ledger-sized piece of paper. And on that, we show all the setbacks and everything graphically. And they're also listed here, front corner, side, rear, so forth. Dimensional standards are here. Actually, this is the template, yeah. So this is a generative. This shows, this is where the dimensional standards are. Here's the graphic plan of what that might look like. And then here are some examples. And we went through, and this was like, further down the way, we went through a visual preference survey with the community or the leaders. We actually did it with the community. This was during COVID, so we did it all on Zoom. And basically, we showed them a whole series of townhouses, and they put like stars next to the ones they liked. And then we included those in the examples here. Now, out in Utah, they're doing a lot of contemporary architecture. There's a really famous New Urbanist community called Daybreak. If you're out at Park City skiing, if you get tired of skiing here, go out there. It's like right in it's in the Salt Lake Basin, and it's huge. It's really, really well done. Y'all would really enjoy seeing it.
So David and Tom, is
Yeah.
this gonna be part of the plan that we give to this?
No, we were just
This
gonna.
would not be in the zoning ordinance.
No, we want to advise him in terms of, as a, next steps category in the
Okay.
report.
Just,
The kind of zoning that would be, involved. And there are lots of, this is just one example, but I just wanted to kind of show you a graphic example. And then down here, it shows you the template of the regulating plan. And then this is kind of like a sample plan, where the townhouses are located within the plan, where you can build it. But anyway, that's just an example of formation, that makes sense, so it's a very user-friendly, you don't have to hire an architect, you don't have to hire a lawyer. Oh, you're an architect, so you may.
You already have one.
Yeah, you already have an architect, but you can you say, I'm an expert on how to do this, I've got plans and all that kind of stuff. And then you can go in, or you can just get a master developer to come in and do it as well.
So I guess, but the cool thing about this, thanks for bringing that up, now, I
Yeah.
didn't plan to get nearly this deep, but the interesting thing is, you know, we started about saying, what existing codes do you have? Do you think you guys could manage a code like that if we ended up with something like that, or would it be preferable than your existing code?
Yeah, I'm sure that, you know, we can manage it. I've dabbled in form-based codes in Florida, but, I'm sure Michael could pick it up easily. Well, he's gonna be the one that has to, you know, I'm getting closer to retirement.
Well, this is a small town called Springville. It's not Salt Lake City, it's a really small town. And so basically the planning director, he was actually one that encouraged it, he said, this is gonna simplify my life so much, because people can understand what they can do and can do. The problem they get is that people bring in stuff that's ridiculous, and it's a back and forth for months. You know, you're trying to figure out how to do things. And so this kind of gives you some guidelines. It also gives you the flexibility. It's not about style. So there's nothing, all we do is, you can ask, suggested visuals, but there's nothing here that regulates, there's nothing that makes them do that kind of architecture. Those are just suggestions. And then you can, kind of encourage them.
I really love that simple one sheet, you know, when a developer comes and says, well, this page applies to this lot. And I can imagine if the town's gonna sell off the lots, you'd say, well, this page goes to this lot.
Sheets attached to the lot.
Staple it to the deed, right? And, it's a really simple way. I find that easier to read than a normal zoning code, just flipping back and forth all through the thing, and I always miss stuff. So, to me, this is a really simple way to do it. Maybe simpler than a typical code.
And then Rick, you're back here somewhere, right? Where's Rick?
Oh, behind you.
Rick, do you wanna come talk about, he does the same thing for street standards, basically. We come up with our standard, we do street sections that basically match the urbanism.
Is that in the online code, or is that in a separate, Rick, you can keep coming up, but your subdivision ordinance, is that on this, or is it a separate document?
It's within the zoning ordinance.
It's within the zoning ordinance, and your street sections are within the zoning ordinance?
Yes.
Okay.
And just the final thing about that's the illustrative plan that we did, and it's really basic too, but it was just showing you. You see it's surrounded by suburbia. We're inserting this DNA.
So currently in your subdivision regs, you have required street sections.
It basically refers to the NCDOT subdivision.
I believe Don was talking about those as well.
Basically,
The town takes over ownership after it's developed.
Right now, I believe, Don, was it Don or was it Rick, you're saying, we really have one state highway in the town right now.
That's right.
Which is the Boulevard? Parkway. Beech Mountain Parkway, yeah.
And it ends where the ski season.
Right there, it doesn't even go all the way through.
No, you're right.
So you have one.
That's it.
And so, it's up to this team really, and really you guys, let us know what you think too. It'd be easier for us to make all of your streets have our own standards, if you're gonna own them anyway. Is there any desire on the town's part to put more and more of the streets into the state system?
They can have all.
You love that.
We have 67 mile roads.
but they won't take them because they're not.
No, they won't take them. They're not
they're-
wide enough.
yeah.
There was a point in time where the highway was gonna go all the way to the north end of town, and the people past the entrance to the resort didn't want the traffic.
Okay.
So and it was set to be paved and done and everything.
So for townspeople, yeah, take them all, anybody that wants them, but I understand.
Well, if you want your road paved, you have to pay for it.
Okay.
We do.
Okay, I wasn't sure if like their width was, okay,
We get a towel bill money.
okay.
They do provide money to take care of
Oh,
your
yeah.
other.
Here's another question, how would y'all feel about apps, because this is like the most polarizing thing in a town.
We were doing just great, the,
What was the question?
Wait, there was like, I didn't finish the question, how do y'all feel about alleys?
Alleys.
Can't plow.
So
You can't
behind
plow, it's
business?
Like behind business, because oftentimes
Too
we
much
have
stuff on
the
it.
T and D,
There's no way.
You're thinking about gravel alleys, right, that kind of stuff?
No.
The old timey gravel?
No, okay.
Hmm?
they definitely.
Well, most people would.
Back street.
The back, I was just thinking, because as we were thinking about designs, oftentimes alleys come up, and we don't wanna, you know, if that's not gonna be something that is really seen as a viable solution.
They're crucial,
They are important.
unless you wanna park all of your cars out front on the street.
Right.
And,
So maybe that's.
But we
conversations
designed them
in the
as
last-
plowable alleys, so you do a 30-foot right
Well,
away.
that's a street. For us, that's a
Right
street.
away,
It's a nightmare.
you do 20 feet of pavement, and usually in alleys it's concrete. And you only do that in your urban conditions because
We
that's
call
expensive.
that a street here.
Yeah, okay. That's what we, and there's 30 feet gives you enough, room for the fire truck spreaders to put their spreaders out.
Yes,
Yeah.
we don't have a 30-foot wide street anywhere.
Okay, that's true, like the ones you go down the residential streets.
18 to 20 feet is about what we've got, you know. We call it a street. Don't call it an alley. Problem solved.
You don't,
You can
but
pave the
that,
street,
so
not an
the
alley.
reason to bring that up is sometimes frontage requirements, if it,
Yeah.
because we might have to say something about primary street, secondary street, of how that fronts, so that you're not having, as they're starting to administer it, something that's fronting an alley because it's called a street, and that's not necessarily how the, plan is designed to. So that's why I bring it up, is because I know it's a tool that we use in a toolbox, but, you know, it's cool to call it a street, but we might have to figure out how to ordinance that for when you're doing buildings.
Like Service Street versus
Right.
Public Street.
Or we can park on our streets.
in the town center, you really need to have alleys, because if you want your street to be a really good pedestrian experience, then you don't want the Tuesday morning garbage bins out there, you know, next to the road. And,
We'll give them a pass.
and you want it to be a good experience.
Yeah.
So-
This is West Jefferson, they have alleys, that's why it's so walkable, all their service junk is in the back.
So it's not a drive-through alley, it's just a walk alley?
All of your utilities are.
No, they can drive through that.
You can,
Yeah.
okay. It looks really
Your
little.
utilities go in the back alley.
One.
Yeah, your utilities go back.
These are
One
the
way.
old style alleys, they were all like 10 to 20 feet, you know, when you go to old cities, but we do new urbanist alleys, they're wider. You know, that kind of thing.
You wanna say what you
Alleys are one on the bottom, right?
So alleys in Vermillion are, they're
Yeah, let's
smaller
go
out
see it.
there.
Let's see it.
24 feet.
24 feet.
But there's also a setback to garage of 3 feet. We found out, this is the other thing, people, how do it's too narrow for me to turn into my garage? And we said, well, what we found out is you could, with F-150s, if you have 30 feet to 35 feet from face of garage door to face of garage door, in one swing you can get in your garage, without having to do that kind of stuff. So we went out and measured and tested it that way.
We do kind of joke that F-150 is a design vehicle up here for.
The best
driveways
turning
and
radius.
stuff.
Yeah.
Daniel's truck.
Yeah.
Yeah, Explorer, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, that's, but it's real everywhere.
Yeah,
Like,
no, it is
Oklahoma,
reality
the Ubers are all pickup trucks.
Everywhere we go claims they have the largest trucks of anybody else. I don't know how that competition works out. The alleys are an important part of the urban town center pattern. Because you want your dry utilities to go out back and your wet utilities to go out in the street in front. So your water and sewer would go in the front, and then all those podium, you know,
Transformer
things that you
boxes,
see
pedestals, all those things.
for television and cable and electricity, those all go in the back alley, so they're not cluttering up the pedestrian walk. It's all about making it clean back there. And you get all those utilities in the back that are dry, and your trees have a better chance of surviving out front by the sidewalk, where they provide shade and slow, slow making capability for the drivers. You what?
You said we don't have sidewalks, so sorry.
This is
You will.
in town.
I know.
In your town center, you'll have sidewalks. So, it's mainly, a characteristic of this type of part of downtown that you set up the more formal curbed street in the front with sidewalks and shade trees. And you want to get all your dry utilities out back in the alley. And, we often, recommend that the garbage pickup go right down the alley. So you put your, plastic bins out in the back, and the truck does all that stuff, and they go down the alley instead of on the street.
Look at another.
Just makes it a lot cleaner.
Your garbage trucks, are they the arm garbage truck or the pickup garbage truck?
Neither.
Person.
Human
You
body.
have to do take it?
No, we have a person who loads it in the back,
Yeah.
unknown how this will be serviced.
Okay.
Cause you have bears and stuff up here, you have to be in cages.
Do we ever?
Do we ever?
We have
Just
bears.
forget.
Just one.
Beloved bears.
So if you really wanna take this conversation south, talk about it.
That could have
Sorry.
been a topic on itself. That's 4 o'clock.
Maybe it's just important because like, people have lives, you gotta get your life done.
Right.
And,
So, if
pretty
we're-
pictures can be pretty pictures, but you gotta get your life done.
Exactly. So if we're talking the commercial town center, right now, commercial entities are serviced by the public and dumpsters.
Okay.
So it's central dumpsters. It wouldn't be municipal pickup
And they're front load.
in the front.
And, but that's really important to
Yeah,
us because
yeah.
that would be something that we would wanna incorporate, knowing that if, for those commercial areas, they're not gonna be serviced in the back alleys like they might be in West Jefferson.
It'd
They're
be a
gonna be
central
serviced very
dumpster.
centrally.
Well, we'll have, we're gonna have, I think there's a little bit of education training here with the sanitation department to talk about it, making sure that we have enough room with our service streets, that they can actually provide the garbage can be in those locations. And, some commercial property, y'all do dumpsters up here at all, or is it?
That's what
That's
commercial
what-
is,
that's what
dumpsters.
it is.
Yeah, they're
front-
usually in the
front
back,
side.
yeah. Cause it's like, if it's trash day, it's gonna smell bad and people aren't gonna shop. So you have to do it in the back that way.
Do the bears stay out of the dumpsters?
Depends if they get
If they're
shut, right?
closed,
Yeah.
If they're closed
And if they
correctly
put
and
trash in the
locked
dumpster.
correctly.
They're locked, you have to lock
We have
them.
bear resistant dumpsters.
We just,
And the raccoons,
How
they
they
gotta
work.
lock them. They're pretty
Okay.
clever.
Let's not talk about trash.
Yeah.
Let's move on.
but as a consideration
Or have
also,
another day.
condominiums up here have to have dumpsters.
The what?
All
Condos have to have
condominiums up here have dumpsters.
But that sounds like some discussion that once we have some designs that we need to kind of maybe talk through with town staff, because you obviously contract with the public and that, that in order for your plan to be actionable, we need to put that into play.
There's also like the one I showed you, the form-based codes, that sheet on it when you're designing with the townhouses and others. Basically, we show where you're allowed to put your garbage in a zone. So actually you locate it, and so what we do is we go through that with the sanitation, the big garbage pickup. So these are the places that people are allowed to keep their cans and their bins and that type of thing.
We often separate, the rear access lanes. So we have, we have commercial alleys, and in residential, you have a rear lane. So you don't, and you design them differently to accommodate the residential versus the commercial.
Tom, that last picture you had up there was interesting with Blowing Rock with the, looks like they just paved the street and already done it up twice and you get those long linear scars.
That happens.
It's like they pave it, the pipe breaks, does that happen? And so,
It is.
I wonder if,
It's the compaction.
just something to think about, you know, where to put those things. So
Yeah.
I was thinking of the street.
we had going, when we get to those, we get back to that. This is me all started. This one?
So as we've
Yeah.
been talking, have there been some things
Utility
that,
poles, they keep those pipes out from under the street.
you've been here most of, like, you both have been here for a big portion of this. Are there things that like, we may have brought up or ideas that you're like, that's gonna be a challenge for us? I mean, I know we can, it's just like, we can fix anything, but like, as is, you're like, oh, that's gonna, as a planner, everybody has like a gut reaction, like, Am I putting you on the spot? Would you rather talk about this?
No, that's fine.
Yeah, otherwise we'll keep talking about.
We come back,
No, don't.
Well, here's another thing
guys
about
want some
utilities, you see
sweets?
here on West Jefferson, they put all their, power lines
I
underground.
was gonna bring up that point.
Yeah, and then here, like,
Right
There's
time.
plenty more in the
They
kitchen
still have
too,
their-
you know.
their stuff
There's a
above
lot of
ground.
stuff in there.
Right, 'cause
Older cities are like that.
right now, pretty much
Yeah.
everything up here is above ground now.
Yeah.
Culture Mountain Electric, that's our local co-op, I think I was mentioned before, but, you know, in the downtown district, I mean, you look at Long Rock there, you got that primary line going through, not very aesthetic, it would be something nice to have underground.
Yeah.
I know we've talked about it up top right now where the old sled hill is, there's a hole right in the middle, but the cost of burying up here is exorbitant.
Because of all the rock.
Now, Eagles Nest, you know, the development over here, everything's underground over there, it's the same mountain, so it's possible.
I think new development is pretty standard to have stuff underground.
Foxcrest is underground, isn't it?
Little Meadows is.
Yeah, Willow Meadows is.
Yeah,
So it's possible.
It's in the subdivision.
Is it?
Yeah.
Right here.
So any new
Something underground?
Usually do subdivisions, they say it needs to go underground. Creates a lot less problems with losing power.
Unless it's water.
I wanna say something about electricity. Mountain Electric would furnish me the material if I dig the ditch. And I had it to where I was gonna dig out Elderberry Ridge Road, and, I think a hurricane came along, and I doubt if they have any money now, so I hadn't asked.
No.
But they will work with you.
Sometimes when you're relocating existing above ground poles, you can move those to an alley. And then you have relatively the same connections from those poles into each of the buildings. And that's a major part of the expense, is how do you get from the pole to the building? And going underground, well, that gets a little bit complicated, so, but you can just relocate from the front to the back, you get the benefits of the aesthetic, improvement out front, and you still have your utility pole above ground out in the back.
Right.
What we found, and the reason we're even bringing up street design standards, we had so many county and city authorities that were ready to do what I said earlier, either do a suburban arterial or a rural highway. And that's all they knew how to build. And so when we come blowing into town, we wanna make it tiny and walkable and cute and trees out front, and they would just go crazy. So we had to be very specific about these street cross sections that are included in the town plan. And say, if you want to have this kind of town, these are the kind of streets that are ready to go, and you can build as of right these designs if you'll stick with this arrangement of things from the building to the sidewalk and to the street, and where the parked cars are, drainage and everything else. So we had to really spell it out in black and white, or it's a really easy thing to mess up. You wouldn't believe the number of ways people have messed up a town street to keep it from being as walkable as it could be.
Okay, this is another, I wanna show examples, graphic examples. This is the town of Carlton Landing. This is a big project, it's 1,300 acres. This is kind of like the newer version of the original plan for Beech Mountain. It's about the same size of the whole place. And actually, this is the first new town incorporated in Oklahoma in 70 years. It actually went through all so it's an official town now. And it's on the lakefront. And you can see it has the same kind of T-zones. This is the town center, neighborhood center, and then neighborhood edge feathers out. So, similarly how y'all, they come out and it gets more rural as you go out. And here are our T-zones. And here's the regulating plan for streets. This is a good one.
Mhm.
Yeah. And you can see here, it's not.
We worked on this week.
Yeah, I think you did. Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So Rick worked with us on this one, and this shows you, instead of just like the three types, the arterial, the local, and the, that kind of thing.
Collective.
We have a kind of a larger catalog, because we want to have a place to have more personality at this scale. I don't know if we probably don't need it for, the 10 acres, 7 acres we're talking about. And unless we do an overlay that extends out further. And so this is the thoroughfare standards sheet, same size, ledger size. There's an explanation here with definitions. See, it says Main Street, Green Street, road, alley, lanes. We're seeing an alley and a lanes described here. More urban, less urban. Planters, sidewalks, curb type, turning radius. That's another thing that Rick can talk about if we get into that level of detail. And then pavement width and on, parking and so forth. And then each one of the streets, this is the template. Each one of the streets has a key like this, explains what type it is, and then here's the details. Like this one's a 60-foot right-of-way. It has travel lanes that are 20 feet, 10 feet each, planting strip 8 feet, sidewalk that is something like that, or 5 feet of
Parking strip.
I'm sorry, this is parking, 8-foot parking lanes, and then a planting strip of 7 feet, and then a sidewalk of 5 feet. That's kind of a classic American, great American street. You see this all over the place. And then you can see that we've got, let's see. And then these are the pages for the street. See, here are 3 street types, and here are the standards listed here. So if you're working with a master developer, and they've committed to building all your infrastructure, then you basically hand these and they follow those. And this is just enough so you know they're gonna turn out, good.
Well, I gotta kind of guess,
And
plenty
this
of
is
guidance,
the-
but it's not constricting, there's still
Yeah.
room for interpreting around.
So, like, for example, this one's called a parkway, and one of the ideas we had is like, some of these, like, one of the kind of the main axis streets that could be in our town center that heads toward the ski slopes could have a large green in between with opposing road, one ways on each side and then sidewalks. But that could also be a skiway in the wintertime. So people could ski down to the town center and then get on the, seriously, right. I mean, in the neighborhood, they walk over, they get their skis on, and they ski down.
Not here.
In the town center area.
Are they gonna be blowing snow in there like they do in the?
That's a question.
Yeah.
When you blow snow, it just goes everywhere, right? There's
Really?
gotta be
There's-
some ways to do it more
direction,
locally,
but-
huh?
So like the
Depends how
resort,
windy it is.
yeah, it depends on the wind, which is a big factor up there, but like the resort that their tube run has this container effectively, refrigeration machine.
Yeah.
Where it basically makes snow inside the container and then spits it out in a big pile and push it.
They can make snow with it at 60 degrees.
Okay.
Which kind of controls where it goes a little bit more. Which,
So we just do
an
that.
idea like this,
Yeah.
I bet you it's
But would you
expensive.
use that instead of the big guns that you
the
have?
guns blow it all the way across from the sled hill to Elderberry Bridge and beyond.
Oh my
Now,
God.
you can adjust, but it just depends on the weather.
Okay, but that gadget you were just mentioning, it's probably easier to control when you switch bands.
Yeah, it really just makes it hot when you.
Okay.
How many weeks per year do they blow snow, make snow?
Pretty much all winter. You know, they'll start around Thanksgiving, if not right before, and, they'll go until, about March now. Usually February.
Middle of
They
March.
could have gone, if we had people working here, they probably could have made it almost another month,
Oh, yeah.
close to it,
Yeah,
that was
really.
that much snow.
Now, with, given the snowmaking capabilities here at the
These couple
resort,
weeks.
it's more the staff that they hire, international staff, that's their timeline, 90 to 100 days, rather than the snow they can produce. 20 years ago, it wasn't that way, it was, if it was 32, you blew snow, and you hope it's 32, which isn't always, so. Snowmaking has definitely come a long way.
Okay.
So, Whitney, what do you think about, there are different ways of doing this, and we can continue to have discussions about it, right?
Yeah.
I think so. Just gives you some examples.
I really like the cut sheets.
Do you?
We need to work on that.
Both the
Just for us
private and
now.
public parks.
Yeah, yeah.
Actually, it'd be kinda handy to have them for your existing streets.
Yeah, no, that's what we're.
That could be pretty cool, right? So
Zoning in existing streets.
If you want an example of what that looks like, Huntersville has that in their ordinance. They did a, because one of my projects, so I just have to know about it, but they did a context, basically how to get to context sensitive streets and the steps that you had to go through, because that is what North Carolina was requiring at the time, and that decision process. So they're also in their design manual, they have, because they have a separate street design manual, but it lays out some basic streets in the ordinance and the design manual. We didn't change that a
How long
little
would
bit.
it take to put this plan and get it finished? A year, 2 years?
Oh, no, well, you're gonna hear back from us, in September.
But how long normally, I mean, what would you plan on? A year, 2 years to do?
Oh, to
Yeah,
build it out?
to build it out.
Oh, building it out, like that's actually, that's part of the, I guess, fun part for us is we're gonna give you a plan and kind of some steps to get there, but it's up to you guys to decide how fast it takes.
But you see what we'd have to do to clear off all the
Yes.
property and
Right.
build? I mean, how, you think it would take, give me an estimate, y'all have done this, some estimate, a year, 2 years?
Well, we will, and I've been thinking a lot about that, because it's just kind of like, there's this kind of dance we'll have to do in terms of phasing. Like, and we really need to sit down with Public Works and say, okay, you've gotta tell us how long it takes to relocate the water tanks. You gotta build new ones, and you unhitch these, you gotta build the pipe. How long will that be taking?
Water,
Will that happen the same time that you might relocate your public works stuff? That's another phase. How long does that take? And then, the recycle center, how long does that take? And then, and then there's also, once if you figure out those, then you would, basically get all that taken care of and then start rebuilding and resculpting the site. Now, you can do it in phases, like, if the mini storage doesn't go away, we'll just build around it, and then later on, they'll come back and, probably upgrade that, but that's something that might happen, at the same time and make it easier.
Because this is and I'm gonna interrupt for just a second, because this is a public-private, more of a public project that relies on private, land as well, versus a developer-driven project where they own all the land. I think that what's gonna end up happening is that you're gonna see some things start off pretty quickly. Then you're gonna see other things that might take 10 to 20 years. So because it will depend on who controls the land, how that it works. And the idea is that this plan will evolve. So, I would harken back to some of the plans that they have mentioned, some places that I have worked in, that they've set out a plan 10 years ago, but we're finally starting to see some of those things like just now coming out of the ground but the plan was in place so that when people, because what's really important on in Preston's position and in the staff's position is that when people come in with ideas, that they say, that's a great idea, but this is how our town's envisioned it, so how can we work together to kind of meet in the middle?
because development is a partnership. And it's a partnership between the people that own the land and the people that provide services. And you can't have one without the other, because the town's not in the business of building buildings, but a developer is. So like, that's why we have to that's why these kind of plans are really important, because we work in that partnership.
Yeah, we'll come back.
And things change over time.
Right, yeah, markets change, like influences change, yeah.
Traffic, oh my gosh, you know, you gotta consider all the traffic that we have to, well, the people that live up here, they don't go anywhere on the weekends. You can't get out, you can get out, you can't get home.
I used to live in Conway, South Carolina,
Oh, I
and
know.
if you have ever been to Myrtle Beach at some point in time, like, yeah, I understand.
Well, when,
There's all
you
bridge,
know,
always a
like,
background.
you know, when they have the Highland Games, 35,000 people are
Right.
here. When they have the Willy Wonka Festival, 25,000 in Banner Elk. Now, if you can imagine what we have to deal with.
Yeah.
And then they had them from 5 different countries for the Willy Worm, and 25 states attended the Willy Worm Festival.
And they can't all bring cars.
Where are the cars? They come up here, they stay up
You
here.
put them in buses.
Well, they have to do something. Because
yeah, but they wanna have
how can
to-
you get to the Highland Games
Yeah.
with the 2-lane bus?
Where's that, where?
On a bus.
Oh, Dan brought it out.
They do. They have buses coming from everywhere. Boom.
Shuttles, right?
Shuttle.
Okay, I think this has been great, thank you guys,
I think in July we'll probably have some
well, this,
better,
yeah.
some more robust conversations about it, because I think we'll have some things to draw that like, we'll really want your input on, and like,
But this opens up, it's
Yeah.
great, just to know what you already have in place and you know, what we might use and what we might want to change.
We'll revisit this in July, and I think at that point, that's the kind of like, this is so early in our process, but I just wanted to give y'all a flavor of some of the things that we've had some successes with. Y'all can start thinking about it.
What procedure does the city have to handle the weather forecasting of the snow? You obviously have to watch that because it's so critical to you when that snow starts coming down, when the temperature goes down and freezes the roads. What do you publish in the way of that kind of information? Warning flag.
The saying on Beech Mountain is if you don't like the weather, wait 15 minutes.
Well, yes.
There's very little forecast.
that should pretty much do it for today,
Yeah.
right? So thank you guys for sticking around for day 2. And I really appreciate that y'all been here, for a lot of you have been here like a couple of days. We'll have another public session tomorrow at 11, and some basic pinups. I don't want to speak out of turn, for some reason I'm looking at y'all.
Repeating back to y'all what we've heard.
Okay, so yeah, we'll just make sure that we're on the right path. So enjoy your evening, and we really appreciate everything you have said to us thus far.